right, Montgomery Catholic, welcome to Partnering with Parents. I'm your school president, Justin Castanza, and I have some very special guests. You may recognize Tom Riello on the end, chair of theology department here at Montgomery Catholic and chief of all things God-related. And then the man who made it possible for me to be here, not just Mike Castanza, but he's my dad. Y'all welcome Mike Castanza. Dad?
Glad to be here.
We're so glad you're here.
Great to have you, Mike.
Usually
Yes,
when we are on the radio broadcasting for the Knights football program, I get to call him Mike the whole time, and it's super awkward. So tonight, you get to be Dad.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Very exciting. Well, welcome to Partnering with Parents. If you're tuning in live right now on Facebook or if you are tuning in on YouTube Live, welcome. We're excited for you to be with us. And you may be accessing this video at any point in the future. Thank you for tuning in when you can, because that's probably when you need it most. Partnering with Parents is an opportunity for Montgomery Catholic, that's us, to partner with you guys, the parents, and that's kind of him too this evening, in a way where we can dialogue, have conversation, and we admit there are some caveats, some disclaimers to begin with. We don't have all the answers. We say that every week. We didn't get it right when we tried the first time, and we're not saying that you're going to get it right as parents, but we know that we can do it together, and we know that if we put the faith, our faith, in the right place and in the right person, we can do this together. So are you guys super excited to do a blend tonight with Water Cooler Catechism?
Very excited, Justin. Very excited.
So as you note, the setup tonight is for a simultaneous broadcast. Here on Partnering with Parents, we will also be recording this episode for Water Cooler Catechism, heard by millions, maybe tens, total people throughout the diocese and across the world. But right here on Archangel Radio, the Water Cooler Catechism broadcast will be out there for everybody to hear as well. So we're going to double dip a little bit tonight. Thank you to Elena Branco and Daniel Harbin behind the scenes who make this possible. And I say it's time to jump right in.
Let's do it. We make it happen.
Ready to roll. So you guys on Partnering with Parents, if you're tuned in, just hang tight. You're going to see a down, we're going to be quiet for about 5 seconds.
We're going to do our radio intro.
And then act like nothing ever happened. Let's do this.
Hey, I'm Tom Riello, the chair of theology at Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School.
And I'm Justin Castanza, school president at Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School, and welcome to Water Cooler Catechism. Tom, what a great show we have planned today.
I'm very excited, Justin.
We are simulcast again. We're on Facebook Live, we're on YouTube Live, and this episode is also being aired live for our Montgomery Catholic Partnering with Parents web series, where each month we did it 6 times in Lent. So we're going monthly now. Give us the Thursday night off a little bit. Fatherhood, we're going to talk about being a dad, we're going to talk about raising kids, and we are seeing our audio folks in the back make all kinds of awesome ideas where it may not be working. We may be pausing here in just a second. This is what we'll be back with you in just a minute.
Hey, it's the wonders of live.
Actually, they're saying that we sound good and we're fine. All right, so we're ready to do it.
We're going to make it happen.
Tom, we're going to start over on Water Cooler Catechism, and if you're tuned in out there and Partnering with Parents, just stay right with us. All right, here we go.
Hey, I'm Tom Riello, the chair of theology at Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School.
And I'm Justin Castanza, the school president at Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School, and welcome to Water Cooler Catechism. Today, Tom, we have an amazing opportunity to talk about fatherhood, being a husband, trying to figure out how to raise kids and walk the path God has laid before us. And very special for us tonight, our guest is my dad, Mike Castanza. Dad, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Mike, we are so privileged to have you here. It's just an exciting opportunity for us here to be able to talk to you and really just share some insights about what it means to be a husband and, most importantly, in our culture, a father.
You know, we are broadcasting live on Partnering with Parents, so we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, but we're right here on Water Cooler Catechism on Archangel Radio. And so for the next 26 minutes, buckle up. We are going to just talk about all things probably that are kind of tough to talk about. And, you know, Tom, you said it first, and you said it right. Too often right now in our culture, a father figure is absent, and so the role that we have as a father is difficult, but it's necessary, it's needed. We have this example of God the Father. We have this example of Christ in our lives. We have the example of our fathers. And so, Dad, That's why you're here tonight. I know your story, but let's let everybody in a little bit into the last 60 years of life for you, and a little bit of marriage and some rearing of children in there as well. Get us caught up on how you got to this point in less than 30 seconds.
Sure. Chappie's Deli, 5 locations. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, I'm 60. I've been married for 40 years to your sweet mom. And, we met right here at Catholic High, which is what we used to call it.
It's still Catholic.
There you go. So, Montgomery Catholic. So, a lot of fond memories here and a great beginning in faith and in love with Miss Diane. And, yeah, we've been married 40 years. We have 4 children. And we have our 12th grandchildren on the way. So we have a lot of experience, and have we done it perfectly? No. Why has it lasted? Because nobody quit. Nobody
Amen.
Left.
Amen.
And, so that's why we're still here, still in the game. And, I'd much rather have a dad that's not perfect than no dad. So anybody out there that's struggling, hey, if you're in the game, you're doing a great job.
It's something that you mentioned. You're here because you didn't quit, and there's probably plenty of times where parents, moms, dads, all of us, even grandparents who are now raising their grandchildren, it seems super easy, especially in the heat of the moment, to throw in the towel and to say, look, this isn't worth it for me. But it's not about me, especially when we're talking about kids. You as a father and you as a spouse are so vital in the life of those young people that you bring into this world. And so, you and Mom had kids as kids. Can we say that live?
Sure.
We were very young. By the time Mom was in her early 20s, you had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And That's right. It's like, how do we learn to raise kids? How do we learn to be married? Right. How do we learn to deal with our families who both lived in town? Right. You kind of feel like you're raising kids in a fishbowl with everybody watching. And talk a little bit about some of the struggles that started then, and maybe things that you've seen that are kind of hardships through marriage. So we won't talk about raising kids yet, but just in terms of marriage. And this will be very brief, I know, and Mom's not watching.
That's right. So, we did get married young, and a lot of people said, oh, it's not going to work, but here we are 40 years later. And it takes both of us. In a marriage for real is 3 people. It's Jesus and the dad and the mom. And it doesn't work unless it's that way. We hung in there. We did the best we could. We made mistakes. And there were tough times, tough months, years, whatever. But we hung in there. And I think part of the success was we took the long view. And not just, hey, what can I get out of this relationship today, but what do I want to put into it, and what do we want to get out of it in the long run? And we both wanted a family, and we said we weren't talking about kids yet, but, we had kids right away, so that was part of the package. And so how do I raise these kids to, and I did probably a better job practically, and I would urge, one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about preparation for this show was, I think I did a pretty good job. Diane and I both did a pretty good job raising our kids, all 4 of you, in the practical sense about money, about responsibility, about working, about, being honest and those kinds of things. But I could have done a better job spiritually. And I figured that out later in the program. And, I heard one of the priests, it was either Father Marr or Father Gallagher, say that he saw his father as a young man kneel down in the house, in the common room, and kneel and pray every day. And that's one of the reasons why he was a priest. It made an everlasting imprint on him. And, there are some things in our life, like when we went to the Grand Canyon, and we arranged our trip around going to Mass, and you've mentioned that over the years, that made a big impression on you. And so out there, I would say to our young families that, hey, the things that we do make an impression and have an everlasting effect and effect into eternity. And so these things that we do for our kids, with our kids, and do put a lasting stamp on it. So I knew that about the practical side, but I was kind of late to the game with the spiritual side. So whether it's, and I know you do a better job than I did in that department, and I know that you ride your kids to school and y'all say prayers, and Vincent, Natalie, Sal know a whole list of prayers that I don't know that I knew till I was 10 years old. So, and they're little, and that's great, and they'll always remember that. That's an impression. that's putting importance on prayer. Well, it doesn't need to be fancy prayers. It doesn't need to be, huge things, but it needs to be that, hey, Dad thinks this is important. And, as fathers, I don't know all the numbers, but fathers are the spiritual example in the family. As the father goes, the family goes. And so we need to be very aware of that and pay attention to the little things and the big things that we do, because our kids are paying attention.
One of the things, Justin, that you mentioned at the beginning about the importance of the father, and Mike, what you're saying now, reminds me of something what Archbishop Brody has said in the tragedy of the father. The father is the doofus character, and, it's okay for the father to just be completely avoiding the role of the home. But what you're saying, and I loved what you said about you and Diane, yeah, you made mistakes, but you're in the game and you're not quitting, and that puts you ahead. There are times when you feel like you are losing. I know as a parent myself, we have the 3 older kids, third one about to graduate college, and then they're off into the workforce, 2 own their homes. You do sometimes wonder, man, I'm a failure at this, but then you see what happens. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing to see that take root in the lives of, 4 children now. You have 4 children who are married. Wow, what a witness to the marriage between you and your lovely bride.
We are fortunate, and all 4 of our kids are godly people going to church and engaged in the community and doing real well. And it's a mix of the secular and the spiritual. And I think everybody's doing fine. And it took a team to do that. I tease people at Chappie's will say, "Oh, Mike, your kids are so successful," and I'll say, or they're so good, or they're so nice, and I'll say, well, I worked all the time. Diane raised them, but it really is a team. And one of the things we talk about, what are lessons learned? One of the lessons learned is that, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I didn't recognize the value that Diane brought to the table. I kind of discounted that. So young families out there, hey, God made her a woman and you a man, and you have different talents and different instincts, and utilize that and use the synergy of that. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = a whole lot more than that.
You just mentioned, to kind of right in the middle of all that you really took on a very a role of trying to teach your kids the practical, and looking back feel like maybe I missed something on the spiritual. And as one of the kids you raised, I think those 2 things have to combine. They have to combine. And as a parent, we miss the chance. It's easy to be retrospective by the time you're a grandparent. It is. It's easy to be that way.
Yes.
And you think about the opportunities that you have, but you probably don't recognize as a parent the opportunities that are living in your daily life every day. And, praying in the car with the kids is one thing, but I miss 1,000 other opportunities a day. I just do. So you got to relish in the fact that you're getting something right. When you do, you really focus on that. You mentioned going to the Grand Canyon. We've said it on Water Cooler Catechism. Secrets out. I've used that example a bunch. It wasn't just, 2 major things happened for me at the Grand Canyon that I've mentioned. One, you can't stand on the side of the Grand Canyon and not admit that God exists. You just can't. 2, we went over Easter because that was when it was easy to travel. And what do you do on Easter? Well, what do you do any Sunday, especially when Mike Castanza is involved? You go to church. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're at the beach, if you're at the Grand Canyon, if you're at Disney World. I've been to Easter Mass in Disney World and the Grand Canyon. And we would go, and we found the same little house. We probably went to 3 or 4 different Easter Sunday Masses in the Grand Canyon. And while that seems like it's not a major impact, your kids were watching. And it is a practical, spiritual, thing that you did for us. And so parents who are listening, you don't have to know that it's good when you're doing it. You just have to know, like you finished with, that you're having an impact and your kids are watching what you're doing. They're watching how you do it. They're watching who you do it with. They're watching what you say. And on Partnering with Parents over the 6 weeks in Lent, we talked a lot about relationships. And the relationship between a parent and a child is so important, and it develops over time. Dad had 4 kids over about 16 years.
Right.
Okay. No secret. Alex, who's like 11, the rest of us are in our 40s. And, you do learn. And the dad and mom that Sam and I had is probably a little different than the Mike and Diane of Alex's generation. And, what are some of those things that kind of change? Is it just that you get older and you get tired? Is it that you learn? Is it that your perception or your ideas of how to do what you need to do changes? Talk a little bit to that, because we've got parents who are kind of at every stage of that and maybe need a little pep talk, or maybe need to know that they're probably pretty normal.
One of the things that we learned in this past year of COVID is that nothing stays the same. And that's always true.
That could be a show in and of itself. Yeah, nothing stays the same.
When the Sahara closed, my mother said, nothing stays the same. So, but as our family evolved, yes, I went from 20 years old to literally 40 years old, parenting Alex, and I can't do the math right away, but he would have been a young kid, and you guys were practically grown. And so we had 2 out of the house and 2 at home. Yes, I'm a lot different, and we're different ages, and then we have the experience of the earlier children, and I grew spiritually. That was a big change. Finances change. So those our schedules change. And literally, like, I used to yell and holler and make a fool of myself with you guys, and by the time Alex and Rachel came along, it wasn't favoritism. It was, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else.
So in other words, you make all the mistakes on the older ones.
Right. I figured
Thank
out.
God for Sam.
Yeah, that's right. I figured out a long time ago that the way to be a perfect parent is to keep having children, but you need to have like 20 or 25 before you could get it perfect.
Well, we're a Catholic show, so we're definitely an advocate for lots of kids. 20 or 25 may be a lot these days. When you talk about the things that you wanted to do as a dad, were there specific things that you learned from your dad, my grandpa Angelo? I know it's probably, it's tough to talk about some of those things that you hold on to, but what are the things that you now as a grandfather are excited to share too?
My father, Angelo Castanza, who's a big supporter of Montgomery Catholic too, and he was a money guy. And so I learned a lot about money and finances in just the practical sense. But he was a 6:30 Mass everyday guy later in his life. In fact, I had some high school buddies who later in life, after Dad had mellowed, they would see Dad and say, who is that man? He did change a lot.
It's not Colonel Castanza that we know.
That's right. So he did mellow, but he taught me a lot about the practical sense. Then later in his life, he was the very spiritual bedrock. He was the one who started going to 6:30 Mass daily, and I saw that in him, and I saw that change, and I wanted some of that. He also was a great father. He was good to his children. He was good to us. He was a great husband. That was another example. He was a great and loyal husband for years. And Mama was a great mother and a tough lady who dealt with Dad being, overseas in Korea and Vietnam and lots of things. So she was a strong woman. So a great example from both my parents about being parents, of loving their children and doing the best they could and making mistakes. I saw it all. Then as a grandfather, he would take time with each of the grandchildren periodically and spend time with them. And so I saw that, and that helps me as a grandfather. So he was a good dad and a good grandfather, great example.
Yeah. Hard to believe, that you now, we look at our grandparents and we think of the experience that we as children, you're forming those relationships with 12 grandchildren. And, Alex, Martha, I'm sure you're going to have more. Sam and Danielle and Meg and I are probably done. So it could increase by a couple, but...
To quote Grandma, man proposes, God disposes.
There you go.
Right, that's right. Well, and speaking of disposing, the suits down in Baldwin County, they want us to do a quick station ID. So our station ID is that you are listening to Archangel Radio on 1410 AM and also 94.5 FM and on the World Wide Web. My favorite way to listen is on the Archangel Radio app, which is a great way to listen. And one of the things I think they will forgive us for, Justin, is I think I'm enjoying this so much. Let's get back to that interview because this is really thought-provoking stuff.
It is, and right here on Archangel Radio, we are also live on Facebook and live on YouTube Live at Montgomery Catholic for our Partnering with Parents episode for this April, as we learn about the role of a father and a husband and how That role is so important in the lives and the relationships that we have in our families and within the school community. So if you're with us on Facebook, thank you for being with us. And for all those who are watching, you're seeing behind the scenes of a filming here, a taping of Water Cooler Catechism.
A question that I just want to touch on real quick, Mike, is, and I've seen it because I've gotten to know your son since he came here in 2007 to join me as a colleague at Montgomery Catholic. I taught your daughter. She graduated in '08. I taught Alex. Alex always would come and see me so he can be late to a class. And you know you did that, Alex. And he would say he got Riello'd. He coined that phrase, Riello'd. But one of the beautiful things to see as a parent is when the relationship goes from disciplinarian, guardian, caretaker to friend. And that's something that I've seen between you and your son, Justin, from the moment I met you. You're one of the first people I met through Trish Crowley at a football game.
Right.
And just to see it, how does that develop? How does that blossom?
You know, one of the best things I ever was advised was by Deacon Fong, who is now retired from St. Bede's. And we were in the sacristy one day before church, and it was right before Alex goes off to Troy. And he had a very successful career at Troy and graduated and has been in the job world now a couple of years. So it's been a success story. But if you'd asked me right before he went into Troy, I would have shared that I was a little concerned, okay? He was leaving his mom. He was leaving home. It was, he's going to be on his own. How is he going to make decisions? How is he going to be on time? How is he going to, all that sort of thing, just the practical sense of it. And I was concerned, and I was sharing that with Deacon Fong, and Deacon Fong says, your role changes now. I said, what do you mean? He says, because I shared with him that I had been kind of hard, mostly on the older kids, but on these kids, and that was my mode of operation, was being kind of hard. The disciplinarian, the pusher, hey, here's the expectations. And he says, your role changes. I said, what do you mean? He says, now, this is going into college, you are the encourager. And so I took that to heart. And so when Alex would call home with whatever the situation is, the car backed into a dumpster, or, I couldn't pick up this class, it's going to, whatever. I didn't pick at those things. Hey, you could have, you should have. I was the encourager. And that was very valuable. It was great for our relationship, effective in Alex's life, and quite frankly, gave me some peace. So it worked out well. So developed into the encourager. Where I learned to have those adult relationships was my relationship with Grandpa, with Dad. We had a normal, son-dad relationship, and I caused him a lot of grief, and so we had a rough time. But then when I got married, he was our biggest fan. He loved Diane from day one. And so we began a relationship as adults. And we cultured that. And we'd go to the Capitol Grill on Friday mornings when I wasn't working at night, or when I was working nights at Sahara. On those Friday mornings for years, we did that. And it was a one-on-one. So we spent time together. We did it on purpose. And so I learned how to have those adult relationships with my relationship with Dad. And so Justin and I have the opportunity to do the football broadcast, and that's one of the biggest things. I don't know that I would do it with anybody else. It's the best of times. And, I'm not a broadcaster, and we could jump in there and do the best we can. But the value comes from the time spent with Justin. And Alex joins in, and the rides going to South Alabama or wherever we're going. And so you put time in it, you try, and your roles change.
The power that you have as a father cannot be, we can't not note that now. And so to our folks who are listening, particularly in our Partnering with Parents episode, and if you're right here on Archangel Radio through Water Cooler Catechism, the role of a parent, whether you're a mom or your dad, today is very dad heavy, but if you're a single parent, regardless if you're the mom or the dad, all these things that we're mentioning are so important. And Tom, we talk about the relationship of that, kind of that head of the household. It teaches our kids so much about how to be future adults. We work at Montgomery Catholic with high schoolers who in less than a couple months here, they're going to be out in the real world. A senior turns into a citizen overnight, and they don't have the supervision of mom and dad. They don't have the supervision of Montgomery Catholic and Mr. Riello. And Dad, you mentioned, hey, Alex he's young, and he's my last child, and he loves his mom too much to be living by himself. And is he going to get up and go to class? And, those are valid concerns. And then in partnering with parents, we've talked about all the challenges and the temptations they're going to face in the digital world and the physical world and the illegal world. But they don't have mom and dad there anymore. And so if you're a mom, if you're a dad, you've got to know, your role while, like you mentioned, Dad, while the kids are watching you, because they are watching, they're seeing what you're doing, they're seeing how you handle stuff. It is so important now to set the standard. And one of the things that you and Mom did from day one in our house, there were never any surprises. We knew what we were going to be held accountable for. And, Eileen Aaron mentioned that in about week 3 or 4 of partnering with parents, that you have to have boundaries and you have to set expectations. There was no doubt in our house if we knew it was right or wrong. We didn't always make the right choice, but there was no doubt if it was right or wrong. And I hope in our house, and with Megan and I, it's the same way. Again, our kids aren't getting it right every time either. They're going to make some of the same mistakes I did, but Mom and Dad are going to be there. So with those boundaries also came the unwavering love and affection. So with my dad, there was never any doubt. Let's just say that school was tough for me some years. There were plenty of parent-teacher conferences. Dad,
what's the thing that Dad said to you when you became principal at Montgomery Catholic?
I've been in the principal's office a long time. I'm just finally in the right chair. Those are his words. Very accurate. But we had to have conversations when I was as young as 5th grade. Thank you, Miss Van Buskirk. We have a great relationship now. It was tough. My fault. God rest Miss McCooey's soul. I spent a lot of time in your office. And Dad, you spent a lot of time on the phone or in person with both of those guys. And I had to get all the way through high school. And we don't get it right all the time. We had tough conversations. You and I reminisce regularly. We would take a walk through the neighborhood, and you would ask pointed questions about why I made the choices I had made that day, and I didn't have a good answer then. I still don't have a good answer now. But what I do know is that your response and the response of a parent is to hold them accountable, but then to love them. There was never any doubt. I was loved, and my mom and dad were going to be proud of me. Those are 2 things that you guys would say regularly, even to this day. And we say it right here. Father Connor said it a couple weeks ago right here on Partnering with Parents. Moms and dads, tell your kids you love them, tell them regularly. Students at Montgomery Catholic, we love you. We tell you that regularly, and we mean it. And we mean it because we love you. And there's no other way to say that. Tom, we live that every day. It's something that's so important. And as parents, as dads, you got to tell your kid. You got to tell your children that you love them. And that's something that I learned from you, Dad. And it's something that we watch the culture in society try to flip the switch on. It's not right. It's not normal. It's not manly. It's not masculine. It's not acceptable. And we as Catholics, we as Montgomery Catholic, we as the diocese, whatever the we is that you need, you as the parent in your family, you cannot accept that that's the way that you're going to raise your children and love your children. You have to hug them and touch them and tell them you love them and tell them you're proud of them. That's super important. And Tom, that's something we do at Montgomery Catholic regularly. And I think it comes from the experience with our fathers.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I could remember, you and me talking about some stuff, and I remember just telling you about, I said, what would your dad do? We talk, and you draw strength from that. And I draw strength on the memory of my dad, just knowing the kind of man. I knew my dad loved me. And you cannot put a premium on that. And what you just said, Justin, is so important. And what Mike has taught you is we are vessels of love. And I think one of the things that I see, and I see it amongst our student body, and sometimes I'll go to you or I'll go to our guidance counselor, Elena Barranco, and I'll say, it looks to me that this child they seem pretty sad today. They didn't say anything. I saw them in the hallway. And, a lot of times it comes back to a deficit of that love tank. There was a great book written some years ago called The Love Languages, and all of us, to borrow the metaphor, have a love tank. And Archbishop Brody says this so well. The mom love tank is almost taken for granted. But the father love tank, wow. The father love tank can set the world on fire. And that's what I'm hearing you're describing in your own fatherhood to your children.
It's been a good ride. It's been a good ride. And I want to make sure that all my children know that I love you and I'm proud of you. And I heard it recently about, fathers need to tell their sons, I love you and I'm proud of you, and your daughters, I love you and you're beautiful. And, to respect themselves. So,
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that we see in our culture today, where I think people are looking for that. They're looking for that, and that's what Justin always taught. Justin had an episode, folks. I just want to say there was an episode about 3 weeks ago on the whole vaping things and the thing. You got to watch that episode. It is sobering, even as a father now. I mentioned we have 6 children. 3 are pretty much, they're on their own now. 3 grandchildren, but we still got, 3 bringing up the rear, the caboose, an 8th grader and a 5th grader. But you need to know it. You need to know this stuff because what's out there is very dangerous. And if you're not filling that tank in their life, then what are they going to fall into the arms of?
Well, hopefully we have surrounded them so well right here on Archangel Radio, right here in the Archdiocese of Mobile and at Montgomery Catholic, that they're going to fall into a community that loves and supports them. But you're exactly right, Tom. The world, this sounds terrible. The world's kind of against everything we just talked about.
Right.
The family unit is no more. The family unit that we grew up on and that we understand is being challenged in every way. And so in our final seconds of the program, Dad, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for opening up a little bit. Thanks for not, selling me out completely and telling any of those stories that I know that we could. But this is an opportunity for all of us to just take a step back and to realize exactly like you started the program. As a parent, we get to be the spiritual leader of our family, and our kids are watching everything that we do. They see what we do, what we say, how we interact with our spouse. That relationship forms the relationship with our kids, and then they are going to be thrust out into this crazy world and have to do it themselves. And so something's going to stick, whether it's physical, spiritual, or a combination of both. We appreciate you joining us right here on Water Cooler Catechism and Archangel Radio. You guys are still our future.
Justin, one of the things I just want to say, and I think the key word, the word that I took away from tonight, or the idea that I took away, don't quit. Never give up. If you're still on the field, you're still in the game.
Stay in the game. Yep, we all make mistakes. The only person not making mistakes is the man not doing anything.
Right.
There's plenty of episodes of Water Cooler Catechism and Partnering with Parents that we could do about the mistakes that we have made. We're not going to do that tonight, and there's plenty of opportunity there for sure. But on behalf of all of us at Montgomery Catholic, tell your kids you love them. Make sure they know that you are in their corner. Make sure that they understand that you are someone who supports them. We tell you all the time, you don't need to be their best friend. You need to be their biggest advocate. And to be an advocate sometimes means giving them a pat on the back and also some hard truths. And, Dad, I'll say thanks publicly for all the times that you told me like it was. You told me I was wrong. You told me this is how we're going to get it right. And in the biggest errors of my life, you were there and said, I love you and I'm proud of you. You're going to do great things. I learned from Mike Castanza and I learned from Ann Caesar, if she's watching. Both of those people taught me that the mistake that I make is not going to define me, but how I move forward from that mistake will be what people see, and that will show the content of my character, so to speak. And so as we make mistakes, a father in your life, somebody that you love, somebody that's going to guide and direct you, a Tom Riello who's in your classroom with you, all of us at Montgomery Catholic try to be that person. That's going to be the person who helps you see that you have value, that you have the ability to cash in on God's grace, His love, and we have an opportunity to be made whole again. And so in this community of faith, that's super powerful, super important. And so we're not defined by the ugliness of our mistakes, but how we pick up our head, accept responsibility, and move forward. So, Dad, I love you.
I love you.
Tom, I love you too. Hope the glare's not too bad off the 2 heads next to me. And until next time, we'll see you real soon, right here.
We had to get it in there.
On Partnering with Parents. Y'all have a great evening.